It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Distinguished Speakers Series. A special welcome to our guest of honor and to our speaker tonight, Mr. Tom Barrack. Mr. Barrack, you are the pride of the American Lebanese community in the United States, and we are very proud of you. I'd like to thank all of you for being here. A special thanks to our Consul General, Honorable John Ibrahim, for his outstanding leadership and his exceptional organizational skills. I'd like to present to you our MC for tonight, and she is Jana Bayad. She is a rising star. Please help me welcome Jana Bayad.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing tonight? Great, awesome. My name is Jana Bayad, as you probably just have heard. My name is Jana Bayad. I am the CEO of SingleDout.com. It is really my honor to be here tonight with you guys to present and introduce our guest speakers, and especially Mr. Tom Barrack.
Great. Thank you all for being here, and it's an unbelievable honor for me to be able to be with people that are responsible for whatever modicum of small success that they can. And I'm going to try and share with you, there's no secrets, but a mode of what worked in my life. And my life is exactly like all of us. I'm the son of an immigrant grocer. I grew up in an 800 square foot house in Culver City. My mom and dad, like most of us, were second generation immigrants. My grandparents spoke more Arabic, Spanish, and French than they did English. And my parents would not let us speak Arabic in the house. Although when I did go back for the first time, 1972, I walked into the Venetian Hotel, and I didn't terrified. I'll say a little bit of the story because it's one of the lessons learned. When I walked in, I started speaking Arabic, and the reception man at the front desk just freaked out. He said, what's wrong? What's wrong? You're speaking a dialect that's 100 years old. So I have to be very capable. But I want to talk to you about kind of globalization and just incidents of life, the destiny of life. And in my life, there's two things that are responsible for me being able to be here with you today. One is the DNA of an ancient and incredible civilization, right? That genetic code that obliterates fear that we as Lebanese seem to uniquely share. This love of life for the moment, this charismatic ability to be able to engineer and wrap together the jewels of life. Everywhere you go in the world, there's Lebanese who take sapphires, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, and through this seamless chain of Lebanese generosity, all of a sudden creates a necklace. And where that comes from is 1,000 years of civilization. When you marry that with the freedom and the opportunity of a place like America, it's magical. And that really is the beginning and the end of the story. But we all think about globalization. What is globalization? And it's one of those things you have to be very careful of, right? Because globalization heaven is more or less an English policeman, a German mechanic, a French chef, a Napoli Sherpa, and a Lebanese local. But if you get it a little bit wrong, you end up with an English chef, a French mechanic, a German policeman, a Lebanese Sherpa, and a Napolese local. So the nomenclature of what these things is a little bit difficult. So when I look at what really makes things work, it's simplicity. It's the characteristics of leadership and integrity. That over time, that karma bank pays off. I have the good fortune to have three of my boys here tonight. And I always tell them karma really works. It just doesn't work when you really need it. It works eventually over time. That's why we need DNA dating. I'm in. So I just want to share with you kind of the incidents of life and what I found that worked, which were a few basic, simple rules. And it's rules of leadership. It's rules of character. It's rules of long-line relationships, which quite honestly, I inherited on my knees stacking cans in my father's grocery store. I didn't learn them in the hierarchy of finance. I didn't learn them in law school. I didn't learn them at the foot of all of the entitled educational forums that we all have. It was baby steps of how you treat people. And over time, the distance between the bricks, the mortar, is what I found that pays off. So I grew up, went to Catholic schools. Of course, we were Maronites, but there was no such thing when my parents came here as Maronite Church. So we were in Roman Catholic Church. And from the time I was a little kid, of course, in those days, before the Wilson days, so I had long curly hair. And of course, I'm dark and I'm in this Catholic school. Everybody's blonde, everybody has blue eyes, and everybody's Irish. So they used to say, well, what are you? I said, I'm Irish. So I didn't know that black Irish came from this part of the world. So growing up in that kind of node was interesting. I was an average kid, a normal kid, but I had a mother who was the most amazing woman in the world, who never let me know that there was something that I couldn't do or that I wasn't entitled. Typical Lebanese mother, like we all have. And the community of Lebanese that we grew up with was amazing because it was this tiny little enclave that stuck together but adapted. So over the years, what I realized is the best thing about Lebanese is we go to Nigeria, we go to Australia, we go to Mexico, we go to California, we go to New York, and we blend in instantly. The worst thing about Lebanese is we blend in instantly. Right? It's different. We adapt, and we don't really hang together like other cultures. So when we go to Nigeria, we become Nigeria. When we go to Australia, we become Australia. And this sense for adaptability, this ease of switching gave us power as a little tiny country with really no natural resources other than its people. And along that way, I kind of adapted that invisibly growing up. And I started to see that there was a little tiny bit of advantage of having adaptability. Because I looked around and I said, most of these people were smarter than me. By the time I got to college, I knew that was true. By the time I got to law school, I was positive it was true. That everybody there was smarter than me, and I'd better figure out some other way of gaining some advantage. So as time went on, I graduated from law school. And in law school, I started to get a couple of the ideas of things that worked. And when I started, part of the key to law school, how many lawyers do we have? Great. So all of you know that Keele Law School is getting in a great study group. And since I was probably the least smart guy, I had to figure out a way to connive myself into a study group of really smart guys. So I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be the best outlier that anybody's ever seen. So I wormed my way into this group, and I would outline all of their studies for the week. And I came up with a color-coded outlining mechanism that was unbelievable. So I became in such demand because I would do all the work for the smart guys. But by kind of metamorphosis, it started to absorb. And I realized that not being the smartest was okay. What you had to do was work harder. And if I worked harder, and if I took the ego out of that sequence, things started to happen. Because then I could befriend not only the friendly, but the friendless. And I started looking at this and said, this is really interesting. I kind of wormed my way up through this prestigious group, not by being the smartest, but by being the most diligent. And by being the most egoless, because they were killing each other. Which is another lesson, right? If you just show up, I have this conversation with my employees all the time, 90% of success are the tiny little elegant attributes of life. Punctuality. My mom always used to say punctuality is a courtesy of people. I didn't understand it when I was little until you get big and you say, well, if I'm trying to create a relationship with you, and I say, let's show up at 10 o'clock, let's have coffee at 10 o'clock, and I show up 10 minutes late, the first message to you is, I'm more important than you. My time is more important. And you're digging out from the very beginning. So over time, punctuality, just showing up, volunteering for everything, shaking hands and looking someone in the eyes when you're with them, really being with them. Remembering first names. Nobody remembers first names. Right? You go into a group and you're circulating with people, and it's hello, 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 and when you leave, you say, I was great meeting, great meeting. You say somebody's name when you exit after you've met a room full of people, it's better than having a PhD from MIT and advanced finance. Right? They'll never forget it. So those little things, I get out of law school, and I need a job. So a friend of mine sent me to one of the best law firms in LA. He sends me to interview with a senior partner. The senior partner says, meet me at the California Club. I've never been into a club in my life. I go to downtown LA. Here is this vaulted palace of wasps. And I'm saying, well, I don't know how this is going to go. I walk into the cavern. I sit down with one of the most wonderful men that I've ever met, who is a senior partner of the firm at this time. And he sits down and he starts interviewing me for a job. And he says, what's the most interesting thing that you've read recently? And I said, well, I just read, they pay me to catch passes. And he kind of looked at me startled, and I said, that was the end of my interview. I better go to dental school. This is going to be short-lived. He said, what is that about? I said, it's about the shortest receiver ever known in the NFL, a guy named Tommy McDonald. This is way before all of your time. You're way too young. But there was a receiver out of the University of Oklahoma called Tommy McDonald, who was 5'6". He was the best receiver in the NFL, and he wrote a book. And the book was called They Pay Me to Catch Passes, and it's about how motivation and people's expectations of you when they're low gives you a tremendous advantage, right? When you don't come from an industrial trust fund, you have a leg up because nobody expects anything. And I always used to look at that in my life. I never had fear because I always knew how to pack groceries. So I said, I can at least be as good as my dad, right? Because worse comes to worse, which my dad used to tell me, if I screwed up in school, he's going to leave me the grocery store in his will. That was enough incentive to get out of there, like all of our history. Peddlers. So the abrogation of that fear was simple. So I told him the story, and he said, that's an amazing book. It's about motivation. I said, yeah. I said, you should read it. So I went back, I found a copy of the book, I put a little note on the book, and I sent it over to his office. 10 days later, I get a note saying, you've been hired by the firm, and I'm just blown away. I said, I must really be brilliant. There must have been something in my educational background that really tweaked him, something in my work that tweaked him. Long story short, the reason that they hired me was the book. That because I said, it's something you should read, and I just followed through with what it was that I said I was going to do, which is I'll send you the book. He got the book that day. That was more important to him than any of the other things that could have been competitive with 1,000 other people. And that cadence continued on through my life. So then I get to the law firm. My mom is so excited, of course, the first college graduate. By the way, my poor kids, we start with pressure on these kids from age 2 of getting into preschool, and then it builds through every level. I never had that, because when I went to my dad, I went to Loyola High School in downtown LA, because it was either that or juvenile detention center. And Loyola High School was cheaper than the juvenile detention center at the time. And when I went to tell my dad that I was going there, he said, well, why would you do that? Culver High is right here, and Loyola High School costs $125 a semester, or whatever it was. I said, well, they have a better football team. I had a whole series of things. He said, well, it doesn't make sense. You can get a free education here. He did the same thing in college. He said, why would you go to college? It's going to cost you $8,000 a year, so you're going to spend $32,000, and you're going to lose $5,000 a year that you could have made. So the whole experience is going to cost you 70 grand. Why would you go to college? Startling, right, when you think of what we do with our kids. So I had to talk my father into allowing me to go to college, and then law school. So now I'm sitting in the law firm, and I knew one thing, that for sure in that law firm, everybody was smarter. I thought they were smarter in law school. I knew they were smarter by the time I got to the law firm. So I figured out a very simple thing. The senior partner who was in charge of finance, which is what I worked in, came in at about 5:30 every morning. So I'd get there at 5 every morning, and I'd put coffee on the coffee pot just so that he knew he was there. Then, of course, I'd go in my office and fall asleep from 7 to 9. Then another senior partner who was in charge of international project management stayed late until 7. So I would stay until he left. Then I'd go home and go to sleep, and we'd start all over again. So I'm in on a Saturday morning, and the senior partner walks in one Saturday. I'm there alone at my desk. And he looks at me and says, are you Lebanese? I said, yes, sir. Of course, at that time, he thought that was a sexual preference. He didn't know it was a nationality, right? He said, well, we represent Fluor, and we've got a gas liquefaction plant going in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to send somebody over. Would you like to go? Do you know anything about gas liquefaction? I said, it's funny you ask. I happen to be an expert in gas liquefaction. I'm dying to go to Saudi Arabia. I had no clue at either. He says, great, we're arranging a visa Tuesday, you're gone. So I'm so excited, I run home to my mother. I say, Mom, this is the most incredible thing. She said, what? I said, I've been picked to go to Saudi Arabia. She broke into tears, screaming and saying, we spent our whole life getting out of this godforsaken area. Now you're going right back into the middle of it? This started the path, right? Separating myself from my peer group. Being willing to get out of the club, being willing to not hang with the peer group that I was with, was the beginning of my good luck charm, of finding that path that nobody else wanted to take, was equivalent to another law of my success, which is absorbing more pain than the next guy. And it really is true. If you can't absorb pain, you better just give up early, because you'll never make it. Every road is painful, every road is unsuspecting, and our life just continues to change and weave in the most unexpected ways. So, sends me to Saudi Arabia. I'm sitting now in the Aramco compound. I'm a lawyer. All my other lawyerly friends are going to the Jonathan Beach Club, playing volleyball. There was no DNA testing, so they were doing whatever other kind of testing they could find. And I'm sitting in the middle of the desert, drinking Siddiqui in a compound with no exit visa. I said, my life is over. After 3 weeks there, my boss walks in and says, you were a squash player, right? I said, yeah, I can play squash. He said, I want you to play squash with somebody 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And Aramco compound was the only place there was civilization. This was now 1973. Nothing existed in the eastern province at that time. So I show up, and there's a young Saudi kid, really nice young Saudi kid who was educated in England, and we play squash. And of course, I'm smart enough to let him kick my butt. And he said, this is really fun. Let's play again tomorrow. I said, great. So I go to my boss. My boss said, yeah, as much as he wants to play, you play. So we started playing 3 hours a day. I had no idea who he was. Long story short, it ends up he was a son of the king, the then current king. Of course, there were only 103 sons of that king at the time. But this was a great one. And after about a month, he said, you know what? I need a lawyer. Why don't you come and work for me? I said, wow, that's a great idea. What I didn't realize is he didn't know what a lawyer was, and he also didn't know that work involved pay. So I called my boss and I said, you know, I love you, thank you for the opportunity, this has been great, but I think this is pretty important because this is our client. He wants me to come to work for him. He says, fine. So I start working for 2 of the sons, which is when I started to lose my hair. I mean, I learned what Lebanese do best, right? We synthesize, and we can absorb more pain than anybody else. And these were wonderful kids, but they were kids. And we're just lost in the jungle of Saudi Arabia. Now I'm saying, I'm never going to get out of the desert. He doesn't know that he's supposed to pay me. I don't have the guts to ask him to pay me. I have no money. This is a true story. Now I'm absolutely out of money. And I get a call from the old law firm saying, look, one of our clients just bought half the island of Haiti with Pacific Lighting. Pacific Lighting owned the Southern California Gas Company. This was now 1974, and OPEC was just formed in 1974. So the oil consortium was just formed that basically started blocking all these favored nation oil deals. So they had bought half the island of Haiti as a transshipment terminal. And this was during the era of Baby Doc. And Baby Doc was one of the most mean human beings ever known in life. So he calls me and says, we need a favored nations deal. We need Saudi Arabia to recognize Haiti so we can get a favored nations deal. I said, look, I represent puppies. These guys are worried about what club we're going to go to in London. They're not worried about Haiti and Saudi Arabia. They don't know where Haiti is. So I went to the boys, I said, hey, look, would you like to go for a fluke to the Caribbean? There's this beautiful island called Haiti. They said, absolutely, let's go. Long story short, we go there, and Baby Doc at the time is ruling. And of course, Pacific Lighting, which was the Southern California gas company, this was my first big deal. By the way, I hadn't been paid. For me to get to Haiti, of course, the jet picked them up. I had to buy a Pan Am ticket, and I had no money. So I get back to LA to pick up some clothes, and I had a fraternity brother from SC who was at Security Pacific Bank. So I called him up and I said, Don, you got to give me a MasterCard with $5,000 on it. He said, you're out of your mind? He said, do you have a job? I said, well, not really. I quit my job. He said, well, do you have any money? I said, no, absolutely. He said, well, do you have any prospect for money? I said, well, maybe in the future. I said, you've got to do it. He said, I'll get fired. I'll get killed. He did it. By the way, 15 years later, he ended up being my #1 commercial broker when I went back to sell the Westin Hotel Company, the Plaza Hotel in Mauna Kea. I had the opportunity to pick somebody. I went back and I picked him, not because he was the best, not because he was a genius, because in those long lines, he had been there when he didn't need to be there. So fast forward times. Now we're with Baby Doc. I've got the 2 Saudi brothers there. We've got everything cooking. I said, you've got to call your dad. One of their fathers was the then oil minister. I said, call your dad, and here's what we need to do. He calls his dad. He says, yeah, it's not a problem. If they want to have diplomatic relations, we'll have a favored nation diplomatic relations. We'll give them favored oil pricing, because it was the transshipment. At that time, they didn't have super tankers that could unload in the U.S. So the deal's coming together. I take the boys in to see Baby Doc. This is the final agreement now. And of course, in those days, the Saudi princes all wore these Piaget watches that were more valuable than a Boeing business jet, right? Diamond studded. Baby Doc is sitting up on a stage like this. The 2 princes are sitting next to me in an entourage. And all Baby Doc can do is look at this watch. So Prince Turki says, well, because Baby Doc didn't speak English, they didn't speak French, so Prince Turki tells me, tell him if you'd like to see the watch, he can have it. So in French, I told him, if you'd like to see the watch, you can see it. Hand him the watch. He puts the watch on. Turki says, if you like it, keep it. I said, wow, that's okay. In the scope of this deal, it's going to be fine. And 5 minutes later, Baby Doc says, by the way, I see no reason why the great country of Haiti should have anything to do with a country like Saudi Arabia. Thank you and goodbye. By the way, he didn't give the watch back. Walks off the stage. I said, my life is over, right? It's just finished. Long story short, that deal gets done. Accidentally, again, in a funny way, and the happenstance of life continues. So the boys now bail out Pacific Lighting. Now the head of Pacific Lighting comes to me I know nothing about the gas company. I know nothing about real estate. I was a finance guy. This is how real estate started. And he said, would you like to come back to the U.S.? I said, man, would I ever love to come back to the U.S.? He said, well, I want you to come back and run a real estate subsidiary we have of the gas company. And instead of paying you a commission, what we'll do is capitalize this company, and you match it with your Arab investors, and we'll start this real estate development company. I said, I don't know what it is, but I'm in. This is the road and how it started. And from then, time after time after time, it was the same accident. So now it's 1980, and this company has grown into a huge company. And I had a partner who was the Pacific Lighting principal at the time, who said, I'm done, I want to get out, it's now 1980. We're building 10 million square feet of industrial and office space all over the nation. We've got high rises going, we've got low rises going, and the economy's just starting to slip. So I said, man, I better go find a buyer. So I run to Canada, get Oxford Properties, one of the most wonderful entrepreneurs in the world named Don Love. Oxford was the largest development company in the nation at the time in North America. He agrees to buy our company. And I had senior executives, 9 executives, we only had one rule in the company, which is you do nothing within the real estate or finance arena unless you first offer it to the company. So these executives now knew we had to be able to sell the company, and I get a call from a guy called Lebanon, and he says, Tom, it's really great to buy this gigantic industrial park. That was a steal. And for you to flip it in 10 days to Metropolitan Life was genius. I said, what are you talking about? I don't even know what industrial park. I have technically with Metropolitan Life. So what happened is these executives get on and on, put this deal together. They're about to flip it because they figure, what am I going to do when we're supposed to close selling them basically off into this company. So I did what every good Lebanese did, and I fired them all on the spot. And I let a great tantrum get away with each other, which we all did. And I woke up the next morning and I said, that was really bad. So I called up Don Love, and I said, I've got to come and see you. It's now December 14th. He said, I'm going to Naples, Florida. It's going to be Christmas. I don't have time to see you. I said, I need to see you. Something's really come up. He said, okay, I'll give you an hour. I get up. He's sitting on his couch. I'll never forget it. And I walk in. He says, so what's so important? I said, Don, the deal's off. He said, why is the deal off? I said, because I fired the entire executive team. There's no company to sell you. There's the assets. He said, well, why did you fire them? I explained it to him. He said, don't bother me with these things. We're closing on Monday. Get out of my room, and Merry Christmas. And I realized the message, which is when you give people the bad news first, amazing things happen, because nobody can do it. And we all couch it. We couch it with our wives. We couch it with our husbands. We couch it with our children. We couch it with everybody. You never really want to give that because you want ease into it. You want to engineer it. But the power of dealing with bad news first is immense. Just immense. So, again, the Lebanese side of it started to become more powerful as time went on, saying, you know, what it is the absence of fear when mixed with kindness and generosity, not greed and graciousness, is so powerful. It's an aphrodisiac because what we're all really driving for is the table. Right? We're looking for these little nodes of connections, of those attributes of leadership that are going to take us to the next step. And nobody finds them very clearly. Right? It just doesn't happen that way. Later in life, the same thing. Boldness. Stepping out of the normal path that everybody's following, which takes real intestinal fortitude. And you all have it, because that blood is pumping through your veins. And we're coming at it from a disadvantage, right? We don't have 500 years of history, of family history in this country, that prevents you from taking bold action, from taking risk, from losing. I've learned so much more from all my losses than I have from my wins. And if you're not losing, you're just not pushing hard enough, right? Because where we find fulfillment along that road is disintegrating comfort zones. Just blowing right through. As soon as you get to a place and you start feeling lethargic, you start feeling comfortable, you start getting hubris and saying, well, you know, I know I'm pretty good at this. What do? We run right up to the next ladder. So when we were first, we become last, and we put ourselves in a situation that's going to ensure that, and we test ourselves again, and we test ourselves again. But along that path, I promise you, there's certain basic, simple rules, laws of success that work through every situation over any time period and in every crisis. And it's those simple things of Lebanese power. It's what's inside of us that gives us that resiliency to stand up in the middle of fear, of fright, of the unknown, of the pressure of everything that's around us. It's not education. I have the brightest people in the world that work for me, and I have unbelievable admiration for them. And in a quandary of constantly saying, what are the ingredients that create these outliers, right? Why are some people ostensibly more successful than those who seem to have all of the amazing credentials to be so? And there's a few things that fly in your face about what that power, right, what that inner power is. And a lot of it has to do with patience and long line relationships and perseverance and communication, right? What's the key to being a great communicator? Not communicating, listening. We all sit down with somebody. If you're at a cocktail party, if you sit there and you're not shoving something in your mouth or drinking a martini, and you're looking to your partner who's speaking to you, and you're actually listening to what they're saying, you walk away and say, wow, that was a great conversationalist. You didn't say anything. You're listening, which is the greatest compliment that you can pay to people. And I'm telling you, in the world of high finance, in the world of big business, in the world, if you are the #1 smartest MIT finance person, or Caltech rocket science engineer, or cardiovascular surgeon, you can be an idiot, you can be rude, and you can forget about long lines. But if you're #2, you better have game. You better have a reason why someone wants to do something with you. And in my business, mergers and acquisitions, the acquisitions of companies all over the world, I promise you, the first 90 yards is simple because everybody has the same tools, right? Education today is at the margin. Everybody has Google. Everybody has resources underneath their fingertips. You have the internet available to equalize the homogeneity of what's available. The shortage is instinct. So if we had the guts, if with my kids, if I had the guts to say, how do I prepare you for 20 years from now? It's not computer science. It's let me turn you loose in the jungle. You get to the jungle and you learn how to find an elephant, shoot it, and drag it out of that jungle by yourself, and you're going to be immensely successful. Because once you get that out of the jungle, you're going to have 11,000 people who will be very efficient at cutting it up. But those people cannot see the elephant in the jungle. So this constant push for the next success range, or for money. I found in my life, and you probably found in yours, that like everything, you know, right? If you want a great mate, don't concentrate by finding her at a bar or finding him at a football game. It's very unlikely to happen. And the more you want it, the less it's going to happen accidentally. And then just at the point that you get fed up with it and say, I'm going back to chess or poker or tennis, boom, She walks in a red dress, in a black dress, it's over, right? The universe delivers you when you remove that resistance. But the resistance for most of us is fear. You say, well, I'm a little bit successful. If I blow it now, it's going to be embarrassing. It's going to be humiliating. I just can't adjust to it. So I have to keep this facade of engineering my security level, and you won't take risk anymore, right? We don't in our personal lives. We engineer it. It's too difficult to be brutally honest. It's too difficult to say what it is that you really need. So what happens is frustrations and upsets, right? I mean, most upsets are miscommunicated communications. I intend for you to understand what I'm saying, and I miscommunicate. I didn't do it right. Or your expectation of what I'm going to do for you is greater than what I'm actually going to do. And we never balance that. So as I look across the Fortune 500 corporations, and this is almost universally true, the number one chairman and CEO was not the brightest guy in the company, wasn't the most aggressive guy in the company, wasn't even the best in the division that he was in or she was in. They stayed out of the flak. They let all of the aggressive ones kill each other off and climbed the ladder slowly to the top. That's generally the way that it works. In all of the businesses that most of us are in, it doesn't work that way, right? The young kids behind us have cleats on. If you slow down for an afternoon, they're going to just run over the top of us in an instant. Everything is animalistic and competitive. It's unbelievably difficult, but it's those long lines over time that build that irreplicable, unattainable ability to push through that comfort zone, which comes from your DNA. I'm telling you, there are no better business people, friends, politicians, scientists, and people than the Lebanese all over the world. The power of Lebanon is amazing, right? We all go back to this little tiny country and say, how can it exist? It's just a little cadre of confusion and irony and 15 different religious sects that all coexisted more or less forever in an intersection of every intelligence community who wants to mess with it. And this only singular experience of Western civilization and religion in the middle of the Islamic proliferation, this little rose, right? This tiny little rosebud. And outside of this 2.5 million people, 22 million of you, all over the world, pushing those comfort barriers, creating those long lines, connecting those harmonic chords that people never forget. So what do they say about Lebanese? Everybody says the most charming, the most hospitable, the most generous, the most kind, the most hardworking, the most unmanageable. Right? We are. You ask every Lebanese, what do you do? I'm a businessman. I used to tell my dad, I said, this is amazing. Does the country from birth, it must be like France. You know, they send them to Polytechnique and Enoch when they're born. How can you have this many businessmen? Right? It's who we are, but we don't utilize it. We don't bond that diaspora, which is the power, that adaptability of our parents, of our grandparents, of all of you who immigrated, who brought those beautiful gifts, those unattainable gifts to a country like this, which gives us this unlevel playing field. We have the opportunity to breed it. We have the opportunity to propagate it. We have the opportunity to spread it. And you do it one person at a time. And that, to me, is the key to success. The families that we've had, the relationships that you all have, that 5,000 years of civilization that's genetically coded, deep in the flesh of where you are, is the power that you've got. The wonder of America is incredible. It's also a challenge because you can be anything. You can do anything. There are no restrictions, and that's friggin' frightening. So my message to you is let the Lebanese side dawn. That is where you will find success. Not in another degree, not in climbing the corporate ladder, not in one more acquisition, not in another $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million. It's not going to matter. We are born to take risks. That's what we specially are bred for around the world, and to meld with every culture seamlessly. And nobody does it better than us. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm happy to answer some questions. And I'd like to leave you just with one thought, which is a poem, which is, we all listen to the tune of a drummer, which lies just over the edge. But we can't really dance to the rhythm or hear the beat until our feet are dangling right over the ledge. Let's all go to the ledge. Let's all go there early. God bless you all, and thank you for the DNA that runs through me and my children.
Tom, thank you for this very interesting exchange we had listening to your experience, and thank you for bringing your children to mingle with more Lebanese genes. We were so eager to hear you that we skipped 3 pages of our script, including my presentation to you and welcoming our guests, honorable colleagues, consul generals, honorable public officials, Mr. Newhouse, representative of the Office of Foreign Missions of the State Department, Reverend Father. All of you, you're most welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you and to have one of ours speaking from the heart of his experience, at the same time describing each and every one of us. In our subconsciousness as Lebanese, there's a Tom Barrack in every one of us. Just let it loose and to success.